Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're going to do probably a pretty long series of videos about building this Elekit TU-8888 push-pull monoblock amplifier. I'm not going to talk about critiquing anything in this series. We're just going to be building it. So let's get busy putting this thing together. Okay, this is going to be a part where you're going to be super glad that you've got some sort of magnifying glass, unless you've got unordinarily good close-up vision, which I may have in my younger days, but not anymore. And so you want to get some good light. I've got a little overhead light here I use, and get your magnifier and come in here and look and read the numbers. These two parts look identical, but they've got wildly different part numbers, and if you get these two mixed up, it's going to be a big problem. So this one is the 2950G, and so you want to come in here and bend these leads kind of like this, and then we're going to find U3. It's right here next to this blue cap, and this transistor's got a flat side on it. You just want to put it in there just like that, and then bend the outer leads over so that it will stay in place. And then we're going to find, just double check the part number on this one. It's a LR8N3. And then again, we want to kind of make a little tent out of these leads like that. Spread them apart. And then find this guy. It's up here near that big heatsink, and that's U2. And then we're going to solder these guys in place. And they had the leads spread apart like that so that the pads are a little farther apart and make it easier to come in and solder this. And this one, get a nice clean tip, get the thing wetted, and try not to put the heat on this any longer than you absolutely have to. And you can see right there, it's trying to bridge over. Get that little piece melted away. There we go. And now we're going to do this little guy here. Just like that. And there are those two little happy solid state guys. And we'll come in here and mark these two little guys off. Then the next one is this little silver cap. It's a special low ESR cap that's the bypass capacitor for the input tube. And I saw that little guy a minute ago. Here it is. I understand that they have the way they package these things, but it would be nice if they would package all the stuff together in kind of the order that you're installing it. Like these guys were in one bag that were something we did on the first page, and now this is in a separate bag with parts that we're not installing till much later. And so it's kind of, just a little feedback to the manufacturer of the kit. It would be nice if you put like all the parts in sequence in bags that were all together. But anyway, and it's showing us that this mark right here aligns with that mark right there on the board. You want to make sure that you put this thing in correctly. It also says the longer lead is the positive, which is this side. So if we go by that, the longer lead goes in first in the positive, and then once we get it put in, the little mark should be on the negative side, which it is. So we've put that in correctly. And then we're going to solder this in place. And I did inquire about, since this is in the signal path, would this benefit from upgrading this cap? And Victor said, don't mess with this. That this is a designed ESR or electronic series resistance, electrical series resistance cap, that you're not going to gain anything. You'll probably hurt the performance changing it. So we're going to follow his advice and put the little guy in right up there, and then mark it off our list. So next it's telling me to install these plugs, the fuse holders, and then these little brackets. So let's do all of that. And that's in a bag. And see, it's all mixed up. It's like these little brackets are in here with the screws, which we don't use to the final assembly. So we got to open this up and find these little brackets that are all mixed up in the hardware. And then we're opening this bag up. We got to make sure we don't lose any of those parts as we get access to these two little guys that we're going to need. See, the screws are falling out. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it would have been nice if they had put these little brackets in the same bag with these things, since we're doing this all together. And then the little fuse holder clips are somewhere else. So here are these guys. And then I think the fuse holder clips are in this bag with the fuses. So then you open this up, and then you got to make sure the fuses don't like roll away. So here are the little fuse holder clips. Don't want to lose those. Those are the small fuses. And then there's another little roll, here we go, with the larger fuses. And here's a little tip they don't tell you in the instructions that I found helpful. It gives you both 5 amp and 3 amp fuses, and you're only going to be using one or the other for your voltage that you're going to be building this thing as. And so you can use the fuse that you're not going to be using for your build to kind of hold these in place while you're soldering them. So like, I'm not going to be using these 3 amp fuses, so I'm going to use it to kind of help hold this fuse holder in place while I'm soldering it. And that fuse holder goes back here in the very back. So we're going to be using this 3 amp fuse to kind of hold these fuse holders in place while we're soldering them. And I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and install the fuse holder on the power board while I have these little clips in my hand, so they don't disappear or get knocked off the table and get lost, because they would be hard to find. But see how that kind of holds the fuse holder spaced out correctly? And you don't want to normally do that with a fuse, because the heat from the solder is going to damage the fuse, but we're going to be throwing that fuse away. And I would not skimp on the solder on this. Go ahead and put a pretty good mound on these fuse holder clips. Like that. And then pop the fuse out. And we got a fuse holder. And like I said, I'm going to skip ahead and to get the power board. And make sure you pick the one for your voltage. See, this one's for 115 volts, which my actual wall voltage is more like 125. So we're probably going to have pretty jacked up voltages given the transformers around for 115. But with tubes, that's not a big deal. And again, we're going to put two guys in the board. I'm going to pop the, see it says a 5 amp fuse. We're going to use this 3 amp fuse just kind of as a guide or a holder while we solder this in place. And honestly, while we're working on these connectors, I think I'm damn going to skip ahead and do this board at the same time. So you get this long plug in, because this board's fairly easy to build. You put it in like that, make sure it's oriented the way it shows. Again, see how it shows the shape of the connector. Make sure it's put in like that. And then again, I would not skimp on the amount of solder that I put on these pins. And as you can see, it skips some of the pins, but it depends on which voltage board you're using. It may use more or fewer pins than this one's using to get the right transformer voltage taps connected for you, because this is where the power transformer plugs into this board to supply voltage to the amp. Like that. And then if you want, you could go ahead and install the switch, but I think we'll do that at the later stage. Well, actually, here's the switch right here. Let's go ahead and do that. So here's the switch, and you can see how it's oriented. And we'll just knock this little board out too. And it'll snap in place when it's right. Just like that. And you want it like super flush. Once again, this is where we're doing some more heavy duty soldering. Just like that. And then we'll finish up the last couple of parts on this later. But that kind of, I wanted to do those fuse clips before they just got away from us, and we already had this bag open, and the switch bag was open too, so we got that done. So let's go back to our main board, and now we're going to install the rest of these guys, and these are pretty easy to spot. One of them goes right here. And this is going to be for the feedback loop wiring from the transformer. Then we've got this guy right here. Then we got, make sure that's snapped all the way down. That one goes there, and that one goes there. And then when you flip, whoop, see that one fell out. And then you want to try to get it flipped over with all of those in place. So you can kind of push down on this and make sure they're seated up against the circuit board. And then you push down with the iron. And again, I'd put a pretty fat bead on these to make sure that we don't end up in the distant future with the solder joint cracking because of these leads moving around, or if the amp gets shipped or something, you don't end up with a cracked solder joint in the future. And this one here is the high voltage AC. And we're not using the center pin. I do like that they used different numbers of pins for the different plugs, so there's no way that you can plug the pigtails into the wrong connector. I've seen too many devices where they'll use like multiple 2-pin connectors, and when they're assembling it at the factory, everybody knows what they're doing, but then when you're servicing it in the field, if you don't notice it and you unplug everything, then you're like, oh my gosh, where did that supposed to plug into? So kudos to them for designing it like that. And then, like I said, this is where the tertiary winding of the output transformer plugs into the circuit board to provide the feedback loop, which is a pretty unique design that I really like about this amp. And then finally, we got these 2 brackets that go in the back, and we want to make extra sure again that these are oriented just like they show on the board. And again, since these are going to be holding the board at the back of the amp, do not skip on the solder. And I'm actually going to use a little, my fatter roll of solder here for these. Because these are going to be mechanically attaching the board to the back of the amplifier. Okay, we got those 2 guys installed, and then we got all of these plugs installed. And let's mark those off of our list here. Now we're going to be putting all of these yellow guys that are surge suppressors into the circuit board, and they've all got markings on them. So you want to make sure that those guys are getting put in the correct locations. And again, they've got 2 of them in this bag, and then they got the rest of them in another bag. Why didn't they put all of these guys that are in the exact same step into the same bag? Hopefully the future kits they'll do that. See, it's got a whole separate bag for those. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm sure there may be a reason they're doing this. It may be that these bags or these parts are shared between kits, and some kits might have, like another kit might have these parts and not those 2. There's probably a reason they do it, but it just makes it a little more confusing to come up with all this stuff. And like, yeah, okay, so there's one little tiny guy, and then there's a slightly bigger one, and these are not orientation specific either. So I'm going to look at these part numbers and just make sure that I'm putting the right ones in the right spot. RX020, that's that little guy, and that's PTC5. So let's find PTC5. I believe all of these guys are back here in this part of the amp. And there's PTC5. And they're going to sit like that, kind of up from the board. And I'm going to install all of these before we solder them. And so this next guy is, again, I'm just checking the part numbers to make extra sure that they actually put the right ones in the bags. And then this one's an H2, and that's what it says on it. And that is PTC 6, which I believe, nope, it's not right next to that one. Where is PTC 6? It's way over here. That's another thing that's kind of weird. Why not put PTC 6 right next to PTC 5, right? Anyway, I'm just whining at this point. Okay, so then we have two of these gray ones, which are BC50R. And that's PTC1 and PTC2. And let's double check the part numbers on these. Yep. And yep, they just say 50R on them. And so they are PTC1 and PTC2, which are right around this socket. And these two guys don't have much of a lead to bend over, and they're really stiff. So let's go ahead and solder these three guys in place. And then, oop, look at that, we missed a pin here. And when we get done, every one of these little gold things will have solder on them. So if you miss a pin, you'll catch it when you get the final thing done. And that one's got, that one there needs a little more solder. Okay, and then we have these two up here. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle too. When you get closer to the end, it gets easier to find the parts because there's only so many missing places the stuff can go. Then you can come in and straighten these little guys up and make them a little neater. Like that. So then we got these two big guys. And these are UN 600. And they go right next to each other here. One of them goes there. One of them goes there. Again, these are not orientation specific. They can go in either direction. And they can hold those in. Come over and bend these leads over. And we'll solder these guys up. I don't know, a lot of people won't need this level of detail of a video to build these things, but I'm doing this for maybe somebody who's never built anything like this before, and it gives them a way of understanding, like, hey, this is what I'm looking forward to, or this is what I got to deal with doing something like this. So this is L6, this little guy. And it goes in PTC 7, which is right there. And I think that's all of these little yellow surge suppressors. Got quite a few of them, right? Okay, and so the next thing that it's showing us, let's mark all this stuff off. Okay, well, I hope you're enjoying this build series. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. I got this kit from Victor Kung at VK Music up in Canada. I'll put the link below. And as always, DIY audio is fun. So until the next video, have a nice day.